Only a few weeks had passed since kind little Edward had taken his passenger train. It had been Edward's first day out in a long while, and almost all the engines had given Edward their full support. However, two didn't. Gordon and 98462 were quite displeased with Edward. 98462 was one of three engines brought by the fact director to the railway on trial. He didn't have a name, only a number, 98462. He and Gordon had a great deal in common. They were both very rude and very cocky. Unlike Gordon, 98462 never seemed to know when enough was enough. "You finally managed to make it out of the station," chuckled 98462 as Edward backed down into the sheds one night. Edward had just returned from his passenger run and was feeling quite proud. "How useless you are, Edward. I'm sure we'll be hearing plenty of complaints from the passengers tomorrow. You were running late all day." The others gave 98462 a foul look, but Edward just smiled. "Actually, we were right on time. I'm very glad to be useful again." Edward knew that as long as he didn't let 98462's words bother him, the engine wouldn't tell him off for long, and soon enough, not getting any types of reactions out of Edward, the big blue bully drifted off to sleep. As Edward was now working regularly on passenger trains, Sir Topham had extended the timetable to run later into the evenings. This now meant that Edward, Gordon, and 98462 would be running the passenger services all across the island. Edward had his doubts, but was determined to work his hardest. Lucky for him, he ran the loop line, so only saw Gordon and 98462 at the big station. Weeks had passed, and Edward thought his trains were getting heavier and heavier, or he was getting older and older. The other engines noticed this and offered to help. "No, thank you," panted Edward. "You have your own trains to manage. We mustn't upset the fat director's timetable." But little did Edward know, 98462 heard everything and made a plan. The next day, Edward arrived at the big station to collect his first passenger train. But when he arrived, he saw that there were no coaches. Thomas must have woken up late again, he thought. He was about to collect some more, when 98462 came hooting and wheeshing into the platform, with Edward's coaches. "No need to fret," he said soothingly. "I'll be taking your train today. We mustn't upset the fact director's timetable." He laughed loudly as the guard blew his whistle and set off. Edward was upset, but he knew he had to get on with his work. That evening, as Edward was backing into his berth, 98462 was boasting loudly. "We don't need little Edward anymore. I've proven that I can manage two trains at once. Why keep him around when all he does is get in the way?" "Hey, Edward helped build these rails that you run on. Without him, none of us would have a railway to work on," fumed Thomas. "He's a thing of the past," 98462 interrupted. "Us bigger engines are faster, stronger, and more up-to-date than old iron." Edward finally gave up, so he decided to take a stand against 98462. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual to collect his coaches and make it to the platform before 98462. The yard was quiet, and Edward knew that he had beaten him. "And what do you think you're doing?" fussed 98462. "Collecting my coaches for my passenger train," replied Edward, trying to sound brave. "I don't think so," he said. "You're nothing but slow and old. You're going to sit in the shed and wait to be sent away, or better yet, scrapped." Before Edward could say another word, 98462 backed onto his line and coupled up to his coaches. Edward's heart sank, but not for long. "And what do you think you're doing?" boomed a familiar voice. It was the fat director. "Collecting my train, sir," 98462 replied, trying to sound as innocent as a lamb. "From what I've just seen, that's not the case at all. I've had passenger complaints saying they were taken to the wrong stations and fellow workers complaining about your treatment to others. 98462's face was as pale as a ghost. My engines, he continued, work hard and help fellow engines. You have done neither of those, and let me remind you that I brought you to work here on trial. But I can see that you are not fit for my railway, so I shall ask you to go back home to the other railway tonight. But for now, I want you to go back to the sheds immediately. 98462 couldn't muster a response, and he sulked back to the sheds. The fat director turned to Edward. You must understand, Edward, you are one of my engines. You might not think so, but you are not alone. If you have any troubles, come to me right away. Understand? Edward can see from his warm smile that the fat director was told everything. He looked across the yard and saw Thomas and Henry smiling back. Now then, you have a train to pull. Then after that, I want you to take a nice long rest. Thank you, sir, smiled Edward. As he set off, he felt his position on the fat director's railway was secure and had no further troubles from that day on. That was until Gordon, I mustn't say any more, otherwise I'd be spoiling the next story.